Joining me now is Duane Boise. He is the CEO of MMJ International Holdings, a company that has three different companies under it. Duane, thank you so much for joining us and tell us a little bit about why this has been such a frustrating process for you, what you've gone through, because it sounds like you've done all the right things working with the FDA, trying to get a compliant medical product to market, and now the DEA is blocking that effort, correct?
Jimmy, a pleasure to meet you. Thanks for having me on the show.
You bet.
Um, Cut to the chase. Three companies, as you stated.
Yep.
MMJ International Holdings is the study company. We filed two investigational new drug applications with the Food and Drug Administration in late 17, 18. And um, the second company, MMJ Biopharma Cultivation, applied to the Drug Enforcement Administration in 2018 to grow strain-specific cannabis in our formulation. And MMJ Biopharma Labs was the analytical lab, Schedule I license holder from the DEA, to do the analytics for the formulation to create the medicine.
Right.
So
And
all three integrated to one goal of creating the medicine to facilitate the clinical trials.
for Huntington's disease and for
Multiple sclerosis,
right? Okay.
primary progressive,
And
right?
I want to point out that this you started this effort when cannabis was strict, it still is a Schedule One, but it was even before the Farm Bill in 2018. If it was, am I right on that?
That's correct.
So
Yeah.
this isn't a hemp versus marijuana thing or MJ thing. This is a Schedule One substance that you were trying to do clinical trials and you were working with the FDA on this, correct?
Right. I just want to be clear here.
Yep.
I am an advocate,
Yep.
and what I say shouldn't be taken out of context. I understand the legal aspects of what we're doing, but we made a determination early on that the only way to do it federally legal as a Schedule One, we don't care if it reschedules or legalizes or any of that, it makes no matter to us,
Hmm.
is to do it the way the laws were on the books at the time.
Right.
And that's what we did.
Right. And and then we got to a point where you went through the whole process. You were working with the FDA. They gave you some approvals at some point to keep you going. Yes.
In the Huntington's study, they gave us a orphan designation, which is significant. It took a lot of work for the team to get there. And what that does is give us a de facto patent for 7 years on the approved final dose medicine.
Yeah.
And it gives us $1 million or $2 million to offset some of the expense of the clinical trials. And but we decided to go that way versus filing all these patents because the government actually defends our patent once the medicine is approved. Once that medicine is approved, also, I'll make a note that we would force the DEA to take it from a Schedule One to maybe a 3 or a 4
Yeah.
as a
Interesting.
result of the approval. Yeah.
Right. And then what happened? How did we get to the point where you guys finally said, you know what? The DEA is incompetent. I think that was one of the words you used, right? Negligence, incompetence. And to me, it's a lesson I've learned. The government's very good at creating delays for any progress, it seems to be. And you're
Well,
right in the middle of it.
I come from a law enforcement family, so maybe I'm naive here, and as it turns out, I probably was, to think that they were operating in good faith because all the roadblocks they were putting in front of us were just didn't make any sense. So I could go all the way back to the initial investigation when they came out to inspect the security systems and the vault. I had a 10 by 20 DEA approved vault in the building. And this particular investigator, Tom Cook out of Providence, came out and he looked like the refrigerator repairman bending over on the floor. And he went down to the town hall and looked at the concrete on the base of the vault and determined that the concrete wasn't deep enough with rebar because of what the first architectural plans were for the building. He forced us, instead of putting, the law says you would have to dig it out and comply, or you could put electronic sensors there. The theory is if somebody's going to blow the bottom floor of the vault, it would set off alarms.
Hmm. Yeah.
Tom Cook makes us dig up the whole floor of the vault, report to the specifics redo the rebar. And every time he was on the phone telling me what to do, I said, but Tom, the reg says, and you can use electronic devices. He goes back and reads the first line and would never acknowledge what I was saying to him. So
Delay. Yep.
that's where it started, right?
Right.
Oh, well, actually, I take that back. It was one more comment before that, which really I remember to this day. He says, are you growing all the marijuana in the vault? He said, I know nothing about marijuana.
No kidding. Shocked to hear that.
Here we go. I said, this is going to be a great experience.
Uh, Here's a question. You mentioned that you were working with cannabis as a medicinal product, and it is still at the Schedule One of the Controlled Substances Act. I've been on record for 7 years, basically saying they now know so much more about the drugs that are in the various schedules. Don't you think it's time to rewrite the bill and kind of rejigger which schedule, which drugs are under which schedule? Than has been existing since 1971 when Richard Nixon got that CSA passed. Doesn't that make some sense, or you have no confidence right now that the government doing anything could get it right?
No, no, I mean, the whole process is skewed, and it's still this the old timers in there with this anti-marijuana sentiment.
Right.
We're not, we're doing this scientific research as an investigation for formulation of the pharmaceutical. The
Hmm.
DEA mandate by Congress is to not inhibit the manufacturing of a pharmaceutical for specific needs of the American public. And they're bucking up against their own mandate, right? If you go on their website and read what their mission statement is, they're bucking right up against it.
That's right. And again, how does the squeaky wheel? How do you get you send out a press release? What's the next step to get this guy fired? Because that's what caught my eye is like this is a company from Rhode Island that's going after a DEA deputy administrator and trying to get the guy fired for incompetence and negligence and some pretty harsh words.
Yeah, no, I come from a law enforcement family, so these people need to be called out. When the person that I was working with in the DEA tells me they're going into a meeting and there's 6 people in that meeting and they have a little discussion amongst themselves, and this gentleman comes out and says, I don't care what he does, we're not giving, sandbag this guy and let's try to make him go away.
Right.
Well, I'm the wrong guy to do that with because I'm not going away.
Good for you. Good.
So, here we are. I'm going to force them to do the right thing.
Yep.
And if I could sue them for damages, because we've got a boatload of money into this
Right.
and they've really damaged us.
Right.
I've spent more than these people will have in their retirement time.
Right.
And so this is personal with the team and we're not going away. So if we have to be to the appellate court, to the Supreme Court, whatever we're going to do, we're going.
Yeah. And all you tried to do was to create a medicinal product to treat 2 diseases and did it above board. Above board.
GW Pharmacy was probably smarter than I was because they grew their products outside of the country and they shipped their medicine in with a DEA permit to do their clinical trials. When I analyzed this, I looked at it and I said, as President Trump is trying to do now, bring the manufacturing back into the country,
Yeah.
right? Because of all sorts of security issues and so forth.
Mm-hmm.
I said, this is the best way. Why can't I do this in the United States? I said, I want to manufacture a pharmaceutical. So what if I'm using the cannabis plant to get extracts from?
Mm-hmm. Right. And yet you got so far and then they basically said, nope, we're not budging because the DEA.
Well, they're trying to put us out of business, but they're not going to.
Yeah.
I mean, I have other sources I've already pivoted, but that's neither here nor there.
Yeah, well, I'm interested to make sure you survive because that is the mantra now of this industry. More and more people that I talk to that have lost everything, had to close their doors, are in receivership. And by the way, Forefront Ventures, another MSO, went into receivership over the last few weeks. And you know, it's literally survive in order to thrive. Because at the beginning of this whole movement, everybody thought as soon as you got in, you were going to thrive, you're going to make millions of dollars. And then reality set in, dealing with the government set in, and the government did everything they possibly could to make it as difficult as possible for anybody in this industry to survive.
Jimmy, let me give you a quick synopsis here on the federal side, because what you just said is accurate. I agree with you. On the federal side, they issue, I don't know, 6 or 7 registrations. We should have been the last one, according to the rules. We weren't.
Yeah.
Out of all those, they've done a lot of damage to those people. And I use Royal Emerald as out in Palm Desert, California, as the example. The group gets together, they raise money, they buy a Kmart defunct 100,000 square foot building in a strip plaza. They go in there and gut the store, manufacture all these grow rooms, probably spent $4 or $5 million, get it all finished, and they go to a financing company and take down 17 million at 15%. The payments were approximately 175,000 a month. The CEO of the company picks up the phone. They get the registration to grow, right? Picks up the phone and calls the quota section in the DEA. Very important. The grow quota says, do you have a scientist that needs that much marijuana? Because they wanted to bring in like 20 or 30,000 plants, start growing it in the building, right? And the CEO says no. And she says, well, then what do you need that much marijuana for? Well, because we just want to grow it because we anticipate future need. And she says, no. And he says, well, how much can you give us? 10 plants.
And do you have to get it from the University of Mississippi back then?
No, he was shipping it in from Canada. Well, he shipped it in from a company out of England.
Okay.
And then they arrived all dead. There were 20 plants. And then he was going to ship them in from Canada. But that never, well, I guess he got the 10 plants from Canada. But they have a 100,000 square foot facility all set to go, growing 10 plants. I mean, my God, you could have done that federally illegal in your garage,
That's
right?
right.
And they spent all that money. Now, this is just a snippet of what's happened to all the people that actually got the registration. So, we've been very lucky because that could have been me, right? I could have got the license, grown 10 plants, and been belly up and gone. Now, either these companies have folded up. I don't know if Royal Emerald has filed for bankruptcy protection yet, but there's serious problems.
Yeah. Right. And what can be done? What's next? What can be done now?
Well, the whole program was a scam. It was designed to fail. They didn't want anybody doing it, and the quota thing was backing it up. As we planned our facilities, and I believe that one of the reasons we're being so strongly opposed is because we have the quota. So in other words, if you think about it, I'm doing clinical trials, 1,000, 3,000 patients through the phase, maybe 10,000 patients. We have done the math on how much that cultivar gives in extract to fill the soft gelatin capsule. And I could back into square footage. If the FDA approves our product, which I believe they will for Huntington's disease, I'll need 1 million square feet of growing specific strain marijuana to fill the gel caps. And that's what they don't want to happen.
Yeah. And again, the public has no idea the chemistry involved, the genetics involved with all this. They just see it as this is the cannabis sativa plant that was, deemed legal federally if it was only 0.3%, and they had no idea. And I'm talking about our lawmakers now with the Farm Bill of 2018. In fact, even Mitch McConnell this week, the head of the Senate, basically said, yeah, we kind of screwed that one up in 2018. We didn't realize we were creating a loophole. I couldn't believe I read the quote because I'm like, 7 years later, he finally realizes that they basically legalized the plant because human behavior being what it is, you knew a scientist was going to figure out how to get high from a 0.3% THC.
That's right.
And that's exactly what happened. And now they have $2 billion industries, one that's underregulated and one that's overregulated to the point of choking that industry, the legal licensed one that they had originally talked about doing in each state, right? Because they wanted to get rid of the illicit market because they wanted to legalize it. What they continue to forget about is, do you understand that people have been using this plant illegally since it was banned in the 1930s in the United States of America? And before that, it's been used medicinally for thousands of years before that. And I love the fact that from 1900 to 1906, doctors who graduated from the oldest medical schools in the United States at that time, NYU, Penn, Harvard, and Yale, wrote 5 million prescriptions for cannabis in the United States for patients. This was between 1900 and 1906, before money got involved and dictated. Well, it all had a lot to do with nepotism and racism that got this plant banned back in the 1930s. And here we are in the 21st century, almost 100 years later, still fighting the same battles that they've been fighting for years in the government. And that's why when I read your story, I was like, here's a perfect example of why a company's trying to create a medicine for diseases that we've recognized. I remember talking to a doctor, Ryan Zachlin, an integrative medicine, endocannabinoid medicine specialist locally here in Massachusetts. And I said, what do you think? Don't you think that if it wasn't banned in 1937, we wouldn't have as much cancer? And he goes, not only cancer, he goes, we wouldn't have as much autism. We wouldn't have as much Crohn's disease. We wouldn't have it's incredible how much that money and rate based on race dictated the history of the United States in this particular arena for 70 years of prohibition now.
Is
Crazy.
that is that doctor a Harvard doctor?
Which doc? No, which doc? The one
The
I
doctor you were talking.
Ryan Zachlin is his name, and he still
Oh,
works out of Salem, Massachusetts. And he's a dear friend and a very 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 good doctor too. So I thought I'd give him a credit. Yes, and you can. And by the way, you can see that interview on, of course, our YouTube channel, Pro Cannabis Media, which is now going to be called WPCM TV. Thank you for allowing me to give it as a show, a little promo for us here. Um, how, you've already got millions of dollars into this project. You're not walking away from it, are you?
no. Nope.
And so how are we going to get this guy fired? I guess is my direct question here.
Well, there's several of them. The first one retired. It was Matt Straight. He was the deputy administrator in charge of policy.
Yep.
He retired. He'll be out shortly. He's just sort of tailing along in there. And the next one, I just, these people have done so much damage. I just don't want it to go unnoticed and walk off into retirement and say, oh, well, tough, we did what we did.
Right.
And then the question is the devil we know better than the devil we don't? I don't know who's coming in behind these people.
Right.
Now, Terry Cole isn't nominated yet. He's going to be the administrator.
Yeah.
I don't know how much he's aware of our particular situation or not. But
you watched the press conference like I did because we talked about that already.
Yes.
It's a priority. I'm going to let the science dictate. And it's like, why are you wait? We've already moved beyond that, Terry. That's how I looked at what he was saying. And
right.
But anyway.
Well, I hope he lets the science dictate because we got all the science that he could ask us about.
Right. Exactly.
Evidenced by our FDA studies and all the submissions we made there. And, I got to give the FDA credit. They've been working very nicely with us and they're asking all the right questions and we're responding and, we're doing the right thing collectively.
And yet the Farm Bill asked the FDA to come up with regulations on what amounts of products they could put into various beverages or topicals or whatever. And they're still waiting for regulations from the FDA. That's been the whole problem to me is the bill created a loophole that the FDA could have filled right away if they put out the regulations with testing and COAs and over 21 carding and all that stuff. And they did zero. And it's now 8 years later and they still haven't. Now, you've worked with the FDA. They know. I don't understand why they haven't done anything with CBD, CBN, CBG. Take your pick on the cannabinoids.
It's very complex.
Yeah.
And
the plant is very complex too.
The plant is complex, and I don't believe that the FDA could quite figure out which way to go. I mean, I'm just speaking from my knowledge about how they're interacting with us,
right,
and the questions that they're asking.
Right.
Some of the studies that they've asked us to do on the formulation, the way we've gone about designing the clinical trial protocols, and so forth. So, to their credit, they're concerned about CBD and potential liver issues. They're they dig into this, and we've had to go back and do other lab tests to prove this. Now, some of it we can only prove once we get in the clinical trial, and there's not enough clinical trials. We need more research. So if you go back to, I think, 2020, when Matt Straight was there in the DEA and he was being interviewed by Buddy Carter, the rep from Georgia, who's a pharmacist, he
Mhm.
said, look, we can all agree that we want something to happen here. Tell me what you need to allow this research to continue on.
Right.
And then at the end of it, he said, look at whatever states were state legal at that time.
Yeah.
His quote was, and I caught it, right? This is the epitome of ineptitude that the DEA would allow this to happen in all these states and not have the federal policy in alignment with it.
Right. And
And here we are.
right. And they love to point fingers at each other. And, oh, it's their responsibility. Oh, it's their responsibility. It's no wonder nothing gets done. It blows my mind. And I got to experience it at Lobby Days in May with the National Cannabis Industry Association down there, and sat in on a meeting. In fact, it was one of Dave Joyce, the Republican senator from Ohio, that's the co-sponsor of the States Act 2.0. And it was fascinating just to listen to the back and forth between people who understood the plant and then really an assistant in the room for the senator, going back and forth with us. And but that's how our government works, and or doesn't work, Duane, right?
Well, and it doesn't work even if you do it the right way.
Right. That's what's so frustrating about what I know your experience, and that's why I'm so happy you were able to spend some time with us here. If you were the king, if you were the king of the government, if you will, um, what would you like to see happen for this industry? And I'm talking about both sides of the plant itself. Can one regulatory body institute enough regulations to do two things: protect the safety of the public, keep it out of under 21s, and still allow the industry to work like any other business? Can it happen?
The genie's out of the bottle, and I don't know if they could put it back in because they didn't do the right thing.
Right.
Uh, we're
And
frustrated because we spent a boatload of money doing it the right way, right?
mhm,
Now, you know, and again, I'm an advocate here, so what I'm saying, don't take me out of context, but they have created a public health safety issue, the DEA, by not doing it. And the FDA is, what do we do now? Right. And this falls into the hemp and it comes under our periphery. I think we're closer to solving it than anybody else is. So I don't know if we're going to set the gold standard or not. But you have all these state growers, and some of them are very competent and they're doing the right thing. But the laws say that if you've jumped out ahead of the federal law and you're in a state doing it, you're never going to get a federal license to grow marijuana for anything,
yeah.
right?
Yep.
The FDA has very specific protocols on developing a pharmaceutical. They have that plant botanical guidance. There are one or two drugs that are approved from the FDA. One of them's from the salve of a tree bark, and it's for venereal warts, and it works. And I don't know what the marketing name is, but that was approved. It took a bit. We're following that same trajectory to get our medicine approved. Is
Mhm.
that the way that the FDA and the federal government is going to go? Would they open that up and say, okay, I could go to a state operator in Massachusetts that's growing it, even though it's federally illegal, and make it legal for the manufacture of a pharmaceutical, right? Understanding that a lot of people use it for a lot of different things, but the issue is it's hunt and peck. You may find something that works for you that you like. The next time you go back in and get that same product, chemically, it's not manufactured to the consistency that the FDA would require us to do, right? So these are some of the bigger issues. The issue in Massachusetts with the contamination is even worse because here you got the DEA. They're in charge of any controlled substance, which it is a Schedule 1.
Right.
The state of Massachusetts has their own internal, but where were they? Why didn't they step down and shut that lab down or arrest people? Right? It's Schedule 1. You're creating a public health safety issue and giving this to the public.
Yeah.
Now, credit to the state of Massachusetts. They came out and did something, but that's the DEA's responsibility.
Yeah. And of
And
course,
it's the FDA's responsibility. Where are you guys?
right. And the states always basically use the same line. We just don't have enough money to do the enforcement that we're supposed to have. Take responsibility. Somebody step up, do the work, do the research, take responsibility for it. And, there was a certain coach of football who used to say, do your job. And I don't see our lawmakers doing their jobs competently because they don't want to take the time to prioritize this at all. And you have over 70% of Americans still want to see this plant legalized. And by the way, that number is growing. The last Pew Research was 68%. It's up to 72% now. So again, fastest growing user group is the plus 65 group. Woohoo, my seniors. Yeah. And they're finally figuring it out that this isn't the same stuff that they used back in the 60s and 70s. And you don't need to use as much of it because of how intense it really is. In the 70s, we used to judge the plant. Is this 1-hit weed, 2-hit weed, 3-hit weed? And if you don't feel anything after 3 hits, stop smoking, go get another bag, if you will. Right. And now, of course, it's so complex. It's a big business. You've put a lot of heart, soul, and cash into this. I respect all the efforts that you've done. And I really appreciate you taking the time out and explaining exactly what your experience has been at the highest levels of just trying to do the right thing by creating a medicinal, using it medicinally to create a product that can help cure Huntington's and multiple sclerosis. So Duane Boise, keep up the good work. Thank you so much for joining us and being so open with us. And we will continue with our one-on-one special reports on a pretty much regular basis on Thursdays here on WPCM TV. For Duane Boise, I am Jimmy Young. Thank you for listening. Thanks for watching. And remember to like, share, and subscribe.
I think I messed up. Did you know there's a place that covers all the cannabis news you need? Pro Cannabis Media is now WPCM TV, your go-to website for things cannabis. WPCM TV is the CNBC of weed, bringing you the latest news you need.
Amy Carter. This week, she reports from inside the State House in Lansing.
I'm Amy Carter from Michigan Weedsters with this week's Michigan Report for Cannabis Coast to Coast News.
And talk shows about all things cannabis.
Well, thank you. And thank you for all you're doing to get the word out. Like, this show is so important.
It all started back in 2018 when Emmy award-winning talk show host Jimmy Young kicked it off with the In the Weeds podcast.
That it's not just any generic paper towel. You do have a brand that you use, right?
Yeah, we live or die by the bounty. I mean...
the quicker picker-upper! I love that!
His mission? Building an army of multimedia journalists and podcast hosts who are documenting the fight to end cannabis prohibition in this country and around the world. Fast forward to today, and we've got the nation's only weekly cannabis coast-to-coast news program with Elena Pinto.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to this week's Cannabis Coast to Coast News, WPCM TV's weekly production of the fight to end cannabis prohibition in this country and around the world. I'm Elena Pinto.
Delivering the nation's only TV news-style program. Since June 2021, WPCM TV has racked up over 1.3 million views with 17 million impressions and picked up over 16,000 subscribers on YouTube alone. Now we even have our own app. For more information, contact the team at WPCMTV.com.